Today, we're going to talk about how to hire overseas contractors. So what's an overseas contractor? An overseas contractor is a contractor based outside of the US who works for either a fixed salary, an hourly rate, or project-based. The main areas that Hire Overseas hires their contractors are Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with lots of candidates being hired in the Philippines, Nigeria, and Argentina. I love working with overseas contractors because it's a completely new way of working. The way I now think about building a team is that you should have a ratio of 5 to 10 overseas contractors per US based full-time employee. I'm a big believer in not doing work that doesn't give you energy, and that you should build systems around yourself to actually get work done that you don't like doing. What's really important for our full-time American employees is that they're either really good at strategy or really creative. And we want to give them as much free time as possible to actually focus on the bigger picture items that fewer and fewer people are capable of doing. I believe that full-time American employees should be focused on writing the strategy playbook, figuring out what works really well across the different areas of your business, operationally, marketing, product, and then you use overseas contractors to actually capitalize on that vision. This is what Rupa Health's overseas team looked like. We had over 10 customer service reps. We had 9 executive assistants. We had 2 Nigerian doctors, 2 graphic designers, 6 full-time video editors, 2 full-time Webflow developers and designers, and an SEO specialist to help us execute on all the work we wanted to get it done. We had our full-time employees at Rupa Health figure out the customer service strategy that worked best, figure out the SEO strategy that worked best, and then we put a full-time contractor in place to actually help execute on that work so we could make our full-time American employees significantly higher leverage, meaning that they could get more work done for less output. And really the way you want to do this is you want to think in systems. I like to think about a business as a machine. You're ultimately, at the end of the day, creating a money printer. You deliver value to the stakeholders of your business, and your job is to optimize that machine, because that's what it is. Has inputs, has outputs. So you got to do systems thinking. So look at all the tiny pieces that you need to get something done and figure out how we can give those different roles to different people. And this is how we built Rupa Health Magazine, aka our blog, into the largest digital publication in functional medicine. Essentially, what the process of our magazine looked like is we had keyword research done for SEO. Then we would create an outline. We'd assign that outline to 1 to 20 plus of writers. We had 1 out of 3 editors actually edit the piece written by the writers. Then we had our lead editor sign off. We had an illustrator make a custom medical graphic for the article. Then we had a Nigerian doctor actually review that medical graphic to make sure it corresponds with the article correctly. And then we had a executive assistant actually upload the article, because I didn't want my practitioners wasting time uploading articles. We could have someone who with a non-medical background. And the reason we use the EA to upload articles is because the way you want to think about this is you want your highest value employees to not do low value work. And I didn't need a medical practitioner spending 10 hours a week uploading articles to Webflow. So we hired an EA whose only job was to make sure that the article was formatted properly in Webflow and would upload it. And this is systems thinking. It was breaking down the entire process of publishing that SEO article and then building a process for it, hiring full-time Americans or medical practitioners where we needed them, and then hiring full-time overseas contractors when we didn't. When working with these overseas contractors, a lot of the time you're going to hear the word virtual assistant. I don't really like that word. I think it is a blanket term applied for people overseas, and it almost kind of devalues the work they're capable of doing. Because when you think of virtual assistant, you think of an assistant who can just do basic tasks. But overseas contractors are so much more than just general virtual assistants. You're essentially getting like a full-time employee, but they are a contractor by all legal purposes. And what you're doing is you're not necessarily hiring a role. You're not hiring a digital marketing manager. You're hiring a podcast editor. You're hiring a short form social media clip creator. You are hiring for a result, because when you hire these overseas contractors, you want the result that they are able to produce, not necessarily work, if that makes sense. So when you think of these systems, you think of your outputs, and then you put the contractors in place to create those outputs. And again, these aren't virtual assistants. These are contractors who are capable of actually producing real results. They're producing a really good content piece. They're creating a website. They are creating a really good graphic for an article that's going to get 100,000 views. They're not just a virtual assistant. Now, when you communicate with these overseas contractors, it's not going to be the exact same as with your full-time employee team. There are cultural differences, and there's also just learning differences as well, where a lot of overseas contractors have not worked in formal Western work environments. So a lot of the expectations you might have around communication and work, it's going to change when working with overseas contractors. Some tips I have for you are be very direct and be very specific in what you want. I usually suggest chat over video, and the reason is a lot of these people you're working with, English is their second language, and they're shy speaking English. They are really excited to work for you and really excited for the opportunity, but they're going to be more shy on video, and you're actually going to be able to respond and communicate better with them over chat, where it's just easier for them. They can take longer to read and understand what you're saying. So default chat over video. Next, over explain. Always make sure you're over communicating. A lot of your team might be based in the Philippines, and you might be giving them flexible time, which means you're going to communicate with them towards the end of your day and the beginning of theirs. If you're not super clear in communication and there's anything that they're confused about, they might ask you a question, you might go to bed, and then they're not going to get an answer till, the end of their day. That's going to slow work. So we always want to over communicate information and give them as much context as we can. Last, ask for status updates. Lots of contractors aren't super great on communication, so you want to set the expectation up front that you want to hear from them at the end of every workday so you know what they accomplished. You also can change this over time as you build more trust and do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or just do beginning of the week, end of the week. But asking them for status updates, very, very, very important. And we've already mentioned that these people aren't necessarily full-time American employees. So how should you think about full-time employees versus contractors? And what's the differences? Well, one is incentives. If you are a startup founder, you probably have given your American employees equity. These contractors do not have equity in your company. They game theory it out, are incentivized to do the bare minimum possible without getting fired. Just that is how incentives are structured. So just keep that in mind when you are asking for work. I'm not saying that they are going to do that, but just know that your expectations should be tailored in a way that these people do not own equity in your company. You are paying them for a result. So expecting them to necessarily go above and beyond, hustle, work weekends, it's kind of harder. So think in terms of getting a result and clearly outline your expectations with them. But with all that being said, I generally do think overseas contractors work extremely hard and very effectively. They just might need a bit more hand-holding. When I think of overseas contractors, you can find awesome B players and they have the potential to be turned into A, because a lot of them haven't worked with, crazy ambitious people who are willing to give them the time of day. So if you're willing to train, provide assistance, what we do at Hire Overseas for our contractors is we've already built this in. So when you hire someone with Hire Overseas, we're already thinking about how do we turn them into an A player for you. But a lot of these people are really, really solid B players that have the potential to become A. They've just never known what exceptional looks like and what a really good work ethic and work environment looks like. So they have that opportunity to grow. That being said, I just want to highlight a point I made earlier, which is a lot of these contractors are kind of point and shoot people. You tell them what to do, they do it. The best way to work with overseas contractors is really thinking about what is the playbook you want to create. If you ask me, Philip, I need an overseas contractor that's going to grow my Instagram to 100,000 followers. Well, I'm living in China right now and my rates start at $20,000 a month. Finding someone who's going to build that playbook for you and really grow that organically, very, very, very hard. But if you already have an idea of what content works and you just need someone in place to actually help execute, that's where overseas contractors are going to give you really, really high impact work. And the way you want to do this and communicate all of it with them is SOPs and looms. So standard operating procedures, and then just literally record what you want done, give it to them, have them do it. Then when it comes to management, I'm a big believer in give trust, take away trust. I have given my executive assistants overseas my credit cards and pretty much all of my personal information, and some of my EAs know way more about my personal life than any of my family members do. The big thing I just tell people is don't give them your crypto keys, because that is the only transaction that is non-reversible. I started hiring people overseas when I was a sophomore in college, and in roughly 10 years of hiring people, I had one person steal a credit card who was an event manager. We did not do the proper background checks on this person. We did not vet them thoroughly enough. But we got those charge cancels and had them refunded instantly and blacklisted that person. When you think about trust, you got to think about it in the sense that these people want jobs. If they are bad actors or do bad things, they will not have a job. Their incentive is aligned to keep their job, so usually bad things don't really happen. In terms of management, a lot of the systems thinking I do with overseas contractors is putting them in place to execute, where there is more communication up front. So when I hire someone, I usually ask for status updates every single day at the end of their day. Once I see them clearly communicating, clearly doing work, we'll move that to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then we'll move it to like a Monday, Friday, then a weekly, and then honestly, we just stop altogether. What I have found for managing overseas contractors within the systems is if I give feedback once a month where I don't really even check the results or what they're doing, I just trust that they're getting it done. And then I'll randomly check on it about once a month and usually give some feedback to give them direction or help them improve on what they're doing. Video calls are really up to you. Don't tell anyone at Rupa Health this, but Rupa University and the Rupa Magazine website were built by a overseas webflow contractor that has been working with me for 3 years, and I have never actually Zoomed called with him. Dave does a fantastic job, and to be honest, we don't need to video chat. And he's not super good at English, so he prefers chat anyway. A couple other things about working experience and managing your expectations is that finding the 0.01% of talent overseas in the entire world is going to be really, really hard. To be honest, the 0.01% of talent usually lives in the United States. So use that to tailor your expectations. You can get them better, but you have to show them what exceptional is. A lot of overseas contractors have kind of worked with mediocre Americans, so you have to show them what exceptional is to set the standards. Otherwise, you might not necessarily be happy with their work. If you show them what the bar is and what exceptional is, they usually will want to rise to that bar. Because in their case, they probably just didn't know. And the reason they didn't know is because the general working expectations for overseas contractors, in terms of your ability to manage, it's a pretty low bar. Lots of business process outsourcing companies or BPOs and just other American companies treat their overseas contractors pretty terribly. They usually have to go to an office, which that commute can be up to 2 hours away. They're required to clock in, clock out, and they are time tracked every day, meaning that their computers are monitored and screen recorded to make sure that they are being productive. So they sometimes have to fake productivity. And most of these people have been treated very, very, very badly. They are yelled at, they are cursed at, they are diminished, they are almost dehumanized. So if you're just kind, willing to teach them, a little bit flexible on time, and don't yell, you're going to probably be the best manager they've ever had. And what I have found to be really successful is that if you create a good work environment, they're never going to want to leave. My typical approach with overseas contractors is overpay them, be kinder, and they're never going to leave you, and they're going to work 10 times harder to keep that job. So I usually try to not be super strict with their working time. I care about their output, not their hours. I don't really care if someone works 40 hours a week. If a recruiter on my team is hiring 20 people a month and they do it in 2 hours a day, I will double their salary because I care about the output of all these people. I generally know what their required output is that I need to get a positive ROI on their work, and I know what is possible within their position. So I always measure output, not hours worked. And if you're willing to give them a flexible work environment where you let them work on their hours, but they're responsive in your morning and night, and you guys develop a really good asynchronous communication, they're going to do better work because they're going to be more excited to work in that type of work environment versus the one that I previously described. So don't focus on them just sitting at their desk from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard to 5 p.m. Focus on the work that they're getting done. But I will say it's extremely normal for people in the Philippines and on the other side of the world to work EST hours, and don't feel bad about it because they are getting paid 3 to 5x more than a local salary, providing for their entire family, and it's an extremely good opportunity for them. And then the last point we're going to finish on is when does it not work with overseas contractors? One is time zone management, when people might be bad at that kind of flexible communication where, if you send them one line on what to do and they send a question and then you respond the next day and now it's been 2 days and we aren't getting any information across, that's one reason. Another is if the contractor is just like not a go-getter and they're really doing that bare minimum, that is also possible. But if you hire overseas, that shouldn't be an issue. And the last one is just lack of clarity. Where I see people fail working with overseas contractors is when either their expectations are ridiculous and they're like giving very, very, very vague instructions and they're expecting someone to just start and just absolutely crush it. That is one reason it might not be successful. This was how to work with overseas contractors. If you need to build your team, please check out hireoverseas.com, and I hope this was helpful.